Welcome to The Victorious Attitude by Orison Swett Marden, a timeless guide to building strength, courage, and the mindset of success. This audiobook series is for anyone who wishes to rise above self-doubt, live with greater confidence, and develop the victorious spirit that turns challenges into opportunities. As you follow along through each chapter, you'll discover powerful lessons on faith, perseverance, and the inner attitude that shapes every achievement in life. Let's begin this journey into Marden's uplifting wisdom, the victorious attitude.
How to stay young. We do not count a man's years until he has nothing else to count. R.W. Emerson. The ability to hold mentally the picture of youth in all its glory, vivacity, and splendor has a powerful influence in restraining the old age process. Old age begins in the heart. When the heart grows cold, the skin grows old, and the appearance of age impress themselves on the body. The mind becomes blighted, the ideals blurred, and the juices of life congealed. Many people look forward to old age as a time when, as a recent writer puts it, you have a feeling that no one wants you, that all those you have borne and brought up have long passed out onto roads where you cannot follow, that even the thought life of the world streams by so fast that you lie up in a backwater, feebly, blindly, groping for the full of the water, and always push gently, hopelessly back. There is such a thing as old age of this kind, but not for those who face life in the right way. Such a pathetic, such a tragic ending is not for those who love and are loved, because they keep their hearts open to the joys and sorrows of life, who maintain a sympathetic interest in their fellow beings and in the progress and uplift of the world, who keep their faculties sharpened by use, and whose minds are constantly reaching out, broadening and growing, in the love and service of humanity. A dismal, useless old age is only for those who have not learned how to live. Growth in knowledge and wisdom should be the only indication of our added years. Professor Metchnikoff, the greatest authority on age, believes that it is possible to prolong life, with its maximum of vigor and freshness, until the end of its normal cycle, when the individual will gratefully welcome what will be a perfectly happy release. At this point, he claims that the instinct of death will supplant the instinct of life, when the bodily mechanism approaches the natural end of normal exhaustion. He believes that men should live and maintain their usefulness for at least 120 years. The author of Philosophy of Longevity tells us that man can live to be 200 years old. Jean Finot says, "Speaking physiologically, the human body possesses peerless solidity. Not one of the machines invented by man could resist for a single year the incessant taxes which we impose upon ours, yet it continues to perform its functions notwithstanding." What we have a horror of is the premature death of the faculties, the cutting off of power, opportunity, the decay of the body many years before the close of life on earth. We shudder at the giving up of a large part of life that has potency of work, of action, and of happiness. This horror of senility increases because life continually grows more interesting. There never was a time when it seemed so precious, so full of possibilities, when there was so much to live for, as in this glorious present. There never was a time when it seemed so hard to be forced out of the life race. We are on the eve of a new and marvelous era, and the whole race is on the tiptoe of expectancy. Never before was the thought of old age as represented by decay and enforced inactivity so repugnant to man. But why should anyone look forward to such a period? It is just this looking forward, the anticipating and dreading the coming of old age, that makes us old, senile, and useless. The creative forces inside of us build on our suggestions, on our thought models, and if we constantly thrust into our consciousness old age thoughts and pictures of decrepitude, of declining faculties, these thoughts and pictures will be reproduced in the body. A few years ago, a young man died of old age in a New York hospital. After an autopsy, the surgeon said that while the man was in reality only 23 years old, he was internally 80. If you have arrived at an age which you accept as a starting point for physical deterioration, your body will sympathize with your conviction. Your walk, your gait, your expression, your general appearance, and even your acts will all fall into line with your mental attitude. A short time ago, I was talking with a remarkable man of 60 about growing old. The thought of the inevitableness of the aging process appalled him. No matter, he declared, what efforts he might make to avert or postpone the decrepitude of age, there would come a period of diminishing returns, and though he might fight against it, he would ever after be on the decline of life, going irrevocably toward the sunset, even nearer and nearer to the time when he should be useless. The conviction that every moment, every hour, every day takes me so much nearer to that hole in the ground from which no power in heaven or earth can help us to escape is ever present in my mind, he said. This progressive, ever-active retrogression is monstrous. This inevitable decrepit old age staring me in the face is robbing me of happiness, paralyzing my efforts and discouraging my ambition. But why do you dwell on these things that terrify you? I asked. Why do you harbor such old age thoughts? Why are you visualizing decrepitude, the dulling and weakening of your mental faculties? If you have such a horror of decrepitude, the loss of memory, the failing eyesight, the hesitating step, and the general deterioration which you believe accompany old age, why don't you get away from these terrifying thoughts, put them out of your mind instead of dwelling on them? Don't you know that what you concentrate on, what you fear, the pictures that so terrify you, are creating the very conditions which you would give anything to escape? If you really wish to stay the old age processes, you must change your thoughts. Erase everything that has to do with age from your mind. Visualize youthful conditions. Say to yourself, God is my life. I cannot grow old in spirit, and that is the only age to fear. As long as my spirit is youthful, as long as the boy in me lives, I cannot age. The great trouble with those who are getting along in years is that they put themselves outside of the things that would keep them young. Most people after 50 begin to shun children and youth generally. They feel that it is not becoming to their years to act as they did when younger, and day by day they gradually fall more and more into old age ways and habits. We build into our lives the picture patterns which we hold in our minds. This is a mental law. When you have reached the time at which most people show traces of their age, you imagine that you must do the same. You begin to think that you probably have done your best work, and that your powers must henceforth decline. You imagine that your faculties are deteriorating, that they are not quite so sharp as they once were, that you cannot endure quite so much, and that you ought to begin to let up a little, to take less exercise, to do less work, to take life a little easier. The moment you allow yourself to think your powers are beginning to decline, they will do so, and your appearance and bodily conditions will follow your convictions. If you hold the thought that your ambition is sagging, that your faculties are deteriorating, you will be convinced that younger men have the advantage of you. And voluntarily at first, you will begin to take a back seat, figuratively speaking, behind the younger men. Once you do this, you are doomed to be pushed farther and farther to the rear. You will be taken at your own valuation. Having made a confession of age, acknowledged in thought and act that, insofar as work and productive returns are concerned, you are no longer the equal of young men, they will naturally be preferred before you. If people who have aged prematurely could only analyze the influences which have robbed them of their birthright of youth, they would find that most of them were a false conviction that they must grow old at about such a time, needlessly worry. All worry is needless. Silly anxiety, which often comes from vanity, jealousy, and the indulgence of such passions as excessive temper, revenge, and all sorts of unhealthy thinking. If they could only eliminate these influences from their lives, they would take a great leap back toward youthfulness. If it were possible to erase all of the scars and wrinkles, all the effects of our aging thoughts, aging emotions, moods, and passions, many of us would be so transformed, so rejuvenated that our friends would scarcely know us. Aging thoughts and moods and passions make old men and women of most of us in middle life. The laws of renewal, of rejuvenation are always operating in us, and will be effective if we do not neutralize them by wrong thinking. The chemical changes caused in the blood and other secretions by worry, fear, the operation of the explosive passions, or by any depressing mental disturbance, will put the aging process in action. Whatever we establish as a fixed conviction in our lives we transmit to our children, and this conviction gathers cumulative force all the way down the centuries. Every child in Christian countries is born with the race belief that 60 years or 60 years and 10 is a sort of a measure of the limit to human life. This has crystallized into a race belief, and we begin to prepare for the end much in advance of the period fixed. As long as we hold this belief, we cannot bar out of our minds the consequent suggestion that when we pass the half-century limit our powers begin to decline. The very idea that we have reached our limit of growth, that any hope of further progress must be abandoned, tends to etch the old age picture and conviction deeper and deeper in our minds, and of course the creative processes can only produce the pattern given them. Some men cross the zenith line, from which they believe they must henceforth go downhill, a quarter of a century or more earlier than others, because we cross this line of demarcation mentally first, cross it when we are convinced that we have passed the maximum of our producing power and have reached the period of diminishing returns. Many people have what they are pleased to call a premonition that they will not live beyond a certain age, and that becomes a focus toward which the whole life points. They begin to prepare for the end. Their conviction that they are to die at a certain time largely determines the limitation of their years. Not long since at a banquet, I met a very intelligent, widely read man who told me that he felt perfectly sure he could not possibly live to be an old man. He cited as a reason for his belief the analogy which runs through all nature, showing that plants, animals, and all forms of life which mature early also die early. And because he was practically an adult at 15, he was convinced that he must die comparatively young. He said he was like a poplar tree in comparison with an oak. The one matured early and died early. The other matured late and was very long-lived. So thoroughly this man was under the dominion of his belief that he must die early that he is making no fight for longevity. He does not take ordinary care of his health or necessary precautions in time of danger. "What's the use," he says, "of trying to fight against nature's laws? I might as well live while I live, enjoy all I can, and try to make up for an early death." Multitudes of people start out in youth handicapped by a belief that they have some hereditary taint, a predisposition to some disease that will probably shorten their lives. They go through life with this restricting, limiting thought so deeply embedded in the very marrow of their being that they never even try to develop themselves to their utmost capacity. Our achievement depends very largely on the expectancy plan, the life pattern we make for ourselves. If we make our plan to fit only 1/2 or 1/3 of the time we ought to live, naturally we will accomplish only a fraction of what we are really capable of doing. I have a friend who from boyhood has been convinced that he would not live much, if any, beyond 40 years, because both of his parents had died before that age. Consequently, he never planned for a long life of steady growth and increasing power, and the result is, he has not brought anything like all of his talent possibilities into activity, or accomplished 1/4 of what he is really capable. It is infinitely better to believe that we are going to live much longer than there is any possibility we shall, than to cut off precious years by setting a fixed date for our death, simply because one or both of our parents happen to die about such an age, or because we fear we have inherited some disease, such as cancer, which is likely to develop fatally at about a certain time. Just think of the pernicious influence upon a child's mind at the constant suggestion that it will probably die very young, because its parents or some of its relatives did. That even if it is fortunate enough to survive the diseases and accidents of youth and early maturity, it is not possible to extend its limits of life much, if any, beyond a certain point. Yet we burn this and similar suggestions into the minds of our children until they become a part of their lives. We celebrate birthdays and mark off each reoccurring anniversary as a red-letter day, and fix in our minds the thought that we are a year older. All through our mature life the picture of death is kept in view, the idea that we must expect it and prepare for it at about such a time. The truth is the death suggestion has wrought more havoc and marred more lives than almost anything else in human history. It is responsible for most of the fear, which is the greatest curse of the race. A noted physician says that if children, instead of hearing so much about death, were trained more in the principles of immortality, they would retain their youth very much longer and would extend their lives to a much greater length than is now general. I believe the time will come when the custom of celebrating birthdays, of emphasizing the fact that we are a year older, that we are getting so much nearer the end, will be done away with. Children will not then be reminded so forcibly once in 365 days that each birthday is a milestone in age. We shall know that the spirit is not affected by years, that its very essence is youth and immortality. In our inmost souls we shall realize that there is a life principle within us that knows neither age nor death. We shall find that old age is largely a question of mental attitude, and that we shall become what we are convinced we must become. As a matter of fact, the average length of life is steadily increasing because science is teaching men how to live so as to conserve health and youth. Formerly, men and women grew old very much earlier than they do now, and they died much younger. We do not think so much about dying as they used to in the early days of this country, when to prepare for the future life seemed to be the chief occupation of our Puritan ancestors. They had very little use for this world and did not try to enjoy life here very much. They were always talking and praying and singing about the life over there, while making the life here gloomy and forbidding. They forgot that the religion Christ taught was one of joy. There is no greater foe to the aging process than joy, hope, good cheer, gladness. These are the incarnation of youthful spirit. If you would keep young, cultivate this spirit, think youthful thoughts, live much with youth, enter into their lives, into their sports, their plays, their ambitions. Play the youthful part, not half-heartedly, but with enthusiasm and zest. You cannot use any ability until you think, until you believe you can. Your reserve power will stand in the background until your self-faith calls it into action. If you want to stay young, you must act as if you felt young. If you do not wish to grow old, quit thinking and acting as if you were aging. Instead of walking with drooped shoulders and with a slow, dragging gait, straighten up and put elasticity into your steps. Do not walk like an old man whose energies are waning, whose youthful fires are spent. Step with the springiness of a young man full of life, spirit, and vigor. The body is not old until the mind gives consent. Stop thinking of yourself as an old man or an old woman. Cease manifesting symptoms of decrepitude. Remember that the impression that you make upon others will react upon yourself. If other people get the idea that you are going downhill physically and mentally, you will have all the more to overcome in your effort to change their convictions. When we are ambitious to obtain a certain thing, and our hearts are set on it, we strive for it. We contact with it mentally, and through our thoughts we become vitally related to it. We establish a connection with the coveted object. In other words, we do everything in our power to obtain it, and the mental effort is a real force which tends to match our dream with its realization. An up-to-date modern woman is a good example of what I mean. She does not act like an old lady, and does not put on an old lady's garb after she has passed the half-century milestone. We do not see the old lady's cap, the old lady's gown of the past anymore. Women getting along in years nowadays dress more youthfully and appear younger than their grandmothers did at the same age. They do everything to make themselves appear young. Men are much more likely than women to grow careless in regard to their personal appearance as they grow older. They wear their hair longer. They let their beard grow. They stoop their shoulders, drag their feet when they walk, and begin to neglect their dress. They are not as careful in any respect to retain their youthful appearance as women, who resort to all sorts of expedients to ward off the signs of age and to retain their attractiveness. The habit of growing old must be combated as we combat any other vicious habit, by reversing the process by which it is formed. Instead of surrendering and giving up to old age convictions and fears, stoutly deny them and affirm the opposite. When the suggestion comes to you that your powers are waning, that you cannot do what you once did, prove its falsity by exercising the faculties which you think are weakening. Giving up is only to surrender to age. We tend to find what we look for in this world, And if, as we advance in years, we are always looking for signs of old age, we will find them. If you are constantly on the alert for symptoms of failing faculties, you will discover plenty of them. And the danger of this is that we are apt to take our unfortunate moods for permanent symptoms. That is, someday perhaps you cannot think as clearly, you cannot concentrate your mind as well, you do not remember as readily as you did the day before, and you immediately jump to the conclusion that a man of your age must begin to fail, cannot expect as much of himself as when he was younger. In other words, a person whose mind is concentrated upon his aging processes is inclined to draw a wrong conclusion from his temporary moods and feelings, mistaking them for permanent conditions. The majority of people who are showing the signs of premature aging are suffering from chronic thought poison. That is, the chronic old age poison. From the cradle they have heard old age talk, the reiteration of the old age belief that when a person reached about such an age, he would then naturally begin to let up, to prepare for the end. And so, instead of fighting off age by holding the eternal youth thought and vigor thought, they have held the thoughts of weakness and declining powers. When they begin to forget something, they say their memory is beginning to go back on them, their sight will soon begin to fail, and they will go on anticipating signs of decline and decrepitude until the old age visualization is built into the very structure of their bodies. Instead of forming the habit of looking for signs of age, form the habit of looking for signs of youth. Form the habit of thinking of your body as robust and supple, and your brain as strong and active. Never allow yourself to think that you are on the decline, that your faculties are on the wane, that they are not as sharp as they used to be, and that you cannot think as well, because your cells are becoming old and hard. He ages who thinks he ages. He keeps young who believes he is young. We get a good hint of the power of mental influence in the marvelous way in which many of our actresses and grand opera singers retain their youthfulness, because they feel that it is imperative that they should do so. Had Sarah Bernhardt, Adelina Patti, Lily Lehman, Madame Schumann-Heink, Lillian Russell, and scores of other actresses and singers pursued any other vocation, they would undoubtedly have been at least 10, perhaps 20 years older in appearance than they are. There are too many exceptions to the race belief that man's powers begin to wane at 50, 60, or 70 to allow oneself to be influenced by it. We really ought to do our best to work after 50. If the brain is kept alive, fresh and young, and the brain cells are not ruined by a vicious life, worry, fear, selfishness, or by disease introduced by wrong living or thinking, the mind will constantly increase in vigor and power. Men and women whose faculties are sharp, and whose minds are keen and vigorous at 90, and even 100, prove this. I know a number of men in their 70s and 80s who are as sturdy and vigorous physically and mentally today as they were 20 years ago. Only recently I was talking with a businessman who broke down at 40 from overstrain, but who is now in his 80th year, more buoyant and elastic in mind and body than many men at 50. This man does not believe in growing old because he knows that 10 years ago he did not have a bit of the cell material in his body that he has today. "Why should I stamp this new body cells with 80 years, he says, when not a single one of them may be a quarter of that age? Many of us do not realize the biological fact that nature herself bestows upon us the power of perpetual renewal. There is not a cell in our bodies that can possibly become very old, because all of them are frequently renewed. Physiologists tell us that the tissue cells from some muscles are renewed every few months. Some authorities estimate that 80 or 90% of all the cells in the body of a person of ordinary activity are entirely renewed within a couple of years. One's mental attitude, however, is the most important of all. There's no possible way of keeping young while convinced that one must inevitably manifest the characteristics of old age. The old age thoughts stamp themselves upon the new body cells, so that they very soon look 40, 50, 60, or 70 years old. We should hold tenaciously the conviction that none of the cells of the body can be old because they are constantly being renewed, a large part of them every few months. It is impossible for the processes producing senility to get control of the system or to make very serious changes in the body, unless the mind first gives its consent. Age is not so much a matter of years as of the limpidity, the suppleness of protoplasm in the cells of the body, and there is nothing which will age the protoplasm like aging thoughts and serenity enemies, such as worry, anxiety, fear, anger, hatred, revenge, or any discordant emotion. If you keep your protoplasm young by holding your youthful ideals, there is no reason why you should not live well into the teens of your second century. Constantly affirm, I am young because I am perpetually renewed. My life comes new every instant from the infinite source of life. I am new every morning and fresh every evening because I live, move, and have my being in Him who is the source of all life. Not only affirm this mentally, but also audibly. Make this picture of perpetual rejuvenation and recreation so vivid that you will feel the thrill of youthful renewal through your entire system. Some people try to cure the physical ravages made by wrong living and wrong thinking by patching their bodies from the outside. The beauty parlors in our great cities are besieged by women who are desperately trying to maintain their youthful appearance, not realizing that the elixir of youth is in one's own mind, not in bottles or boxes. Is there anything quite so ghastly as to see an old lady, really old because her heart is no longer young, with a painted or enameled face, dressed like a young girl? Such a woman deceives no one but herself. Other people can see the old dry skin beneath the rouge. They can see the wrinkles which she tries to disguise. She cannot cover up her age with such frivolous pretenses. The painting of cheeks, the wearing of girlish frocks do not make a person young. It is largely a question of the age of the mind. If the mind has become hardened, dry, uninteresting, if there is no charm in the personality, one is old, no matter what his or her years count. Idle, selfish women of wealth who live an animal life, who are constantly doing things which hasten the appearance of old age, overeating, overdrinking, oversleeping, idling life away, having nothing to do but gratify every luxurious whim, are the best customers of beauty doctors who try to erase the marks of old age by treating the skin and hair. Doctoring the effects instead of trying to remove the cause of old age has never been and can never be really successful. You cannot repair the ravages of age on the outside. You must remove the cause, which is in the mind, in the heart. When the afflictions are marbleized, when one ceases to be sympathetic and helpful and interested in life, the ravages of old age will appear in spite of all the beauty doctors in the world. I know indolent wives of rich men who cannot understand why they age so rapidly in appearance when living such easy, carefree, worry-free lives. They are puzzled to know why it is when they do not have to work, when they have no cares, when their wants are all supplied without any effort of theirs. They do not retain their youthful appearance many years longer than they do. The fact is, those women stagnate, and nothing ages one faster than mental and physical stagnation. Work, useful employment of some sort, is the price of all real growth, of all real human expansion. He or she who indulges in continuous idleness pays the price in constant deterioration, physical, mental, and moral. A ship lying idle in the wharf will rot and go to destruction much more rapidly than a ship at sea in constant use. Every force in nature seems to combine in corroding, destroying the unused thing, the idle person. Work, love, kindness, sympathy, helpfulness, unselfish interest, these are the eternal youth essences. These never age, and if you make friends with them, they will act like a leaven in your life, enriching your nature, sweetening and ennobling your character, and prolonging your youth even to the century mark. We are learning that the fabled fountain of youth lies in ourselves, is in our own mentality. Perpetual rejuvenation and renewal are possible through right thinking. We look as old as we think and feel, because thought and feeling maintain or change our appearance in exact accordance with their persistence or their variations. It is impossible to appear youthful and remain young unless we feel young. Youthful thinking should be a life habit. End of chapter 15.
If you enjoy timeless wisdom like this, consider subscribing for more audiobooks just like it.
Our Oneness with Infinite Life. He lives best and most who gives God his greatest opportunity in him. If we only knew how to live and move and have our being in him, to be conscious of this very instant, we should then know what true living means. We should be satisfied, for we should then awake in his likeness. Deep within every heart that has not dulled the sense of its inner vision is the belief that we are one with some great unknown, unseen power, and we are somehow inseparably connected with the infinite consciousness. It is a mental law that thoughts and convictions can only attract their kind. A hatred thought is a hatred magnet, and the longer we harbor it, the more steadily we contemplate it, focus our minds upon it, the larger and more powerful the hatred magnet becomes. In the early days of the great European war, a Jewish soldier, in the first line of a Russian battalion, engaged in a man-to-man fight with an Austrian in the opposing battalion. In their desperate encounter, the Russian Jew drove his bayonet through the breast of his opponent. As the latter, an Austrian Jew, fell mortally wounded, with his dying breath he gasped the Hebrew prayer which begins, "Hear, O Israel." The Russian, realizing that he had killed a brother Jew, overcome with horror, fell fainting on the battlefield. When he regained consciousness, he was a raving lunatic. When will men realize that we are all brothers, that we are all members of the same great human family, children of the same great Father-Mother God? When will we see, though oceans and continents divide us, though we may speak different tongues, may differ in race, color, and creed, yet we are so closely related in thought and motive that our deepest, most vital interests are identical. Time and again, despite all outward differences, has that invisible bond of union which binds mankind to one great family manifested itself even on the battlefield. There men who have sabered or shot at and wounded each other have become fast friends and learned to feel their brotherhood. Many and many a time has it happened that soldiers who had been bitter enemies in battle and had tried in every way to kill each other have found while convalescing side by side that they were really one in sympathy and feeling, brothers at heart, and did not know it. If these men had known and seen into one another's soul before the battle as they had afterwards in the hospital, they never could have been induced to fire at or try to injure one another. In spite of our failures, our blunders, our crimes, the nations are coming closer and closer together. Scientific discoveries, marvelous inventions, the extended use of steam and electricity, the conquest of the air, all these are fast welding the interests of mankind and bringing into close and intimate relation the most distant countries of the globe. The Occident and the Orient are no longer at the ends of the earth. They are beginning to know and to respect each other, and to learn each from the other. They are beginning to realize in its largest sense the truth of Kipling's utterance. There is neither east nor west, border nor breed nor birth, when two strong men stand face to face, though they come from the ends of the earth. Scientists are piling up proof after proof of the unity, not only of mankind, but of everything in the universe, the oneness of all life. They are demonstrating that there is but one substance, one eternal force or essence in the universe, and that all we see is but a varying expression of it. Everything about us is merely a modification, a change of form of its universal substance, just as electricity is manifestation of force in various forms, in its unchained power in rendering giant trees and destroying huge buildings, and as harnessed by man in moving trains, in lighting homes, in furnishing heat for cooking, and in many other domestic and industrial devices. The lesson of lessons for us to learn from this is our inseparable union with the Creator of life, that everlasting, eternal unity of spirit, that oneness with the Father which Christ came to teach. I and the Father are one. I am the vine, ye are the branches. We are as closely united one to the other, and all to the Father, as are the branches to the parent stem. When we are conscious of our union, of our co-partnership with the Infinite, we feel an added power, just as the branch feels the force of life currents flowing into it from the vine. Severed from the parent stem, the same branch would not feel so confident. It would soon find that of itself it could do nothing, and in a short time it would wither and die. The moment we pluck a flower from its stem, it begins to wilt and fade because it is separated from the source of its life. Cut off from the great chemical laboratory of nature, from the creative, miracle-working energy of the sun, the soil, and the atmosphere, it dies within a few hours. The moment we are cut off from our divine source we begin to wither, shrivel, and die. As long as we remain separate, nothing can stop this fatal blighting process. When we are not fed from our source, we are like the branch severed from the parent vine, like the flower plucked from its mother stem. My experience has shown that people who, from different causes, feel cut off from connection with the divine source of things suffer intensely from fear. They are filled with a vague but overmastering terror, which presses upon them with greater force because it is unseen, unknown. They dimly feel that, like meteors in the sky, which have passed beyond the controlling gravity governing the other heavenly bodies, they are separate, unrelated human atoms without assurance that they are under a protective, guiding, sustaining power. Victims of extreme nervous diseases are often overwhelmed with a sense of utter isolation, of being cut off from every sustaining force, and they are terror-stricken, just as a child who has lost its way and knows not where to turn. Temporarily, and in a lesser degree, people who are terrified in a thunderstorm and rush to a cellar, anywhere to hide themselves from the threatened danger, suffer from this feeling of separation, of aloneness. All who are affected in this way would be greatly benefited by dwelling on such biblical passages as, "In Him we live and move and have our being, the Father in me and I in the Father." These are strictly scientific truths. We could not live or move or have any being apart from the power that made us, that sustains and supports us, and the consciousness of this gives a steadying, buttressing sense of security and safety that nothing else can. Our individual strength comes from our conscious oneness with Omnipotence, just as our national or corporate strength is derived from union with one another. Each human being is like a drop of water in the ocean. He is not independent. He cannot work alone. Consciously or unconsciously, he is a part of the masses all around him. He is touched by the other water drops on every side, and his existence, his success is largely dependent upon his union with the others. Even if a drop of the ocean could separate itself from the mass, and should try to live its own life in its own way, it would soon cease to be as a drop. A man cannot accomplish much alone. His success depends on his union with other men. His dignity and strength are reinforced by the organization or association of which he is a unit, as a cable is reinforced by the sum of the strength of its separate wires. Nature, says Humboldt, is unity in diversity of manifestation, one stupendous whole, animated by the breath of life. When we come into the conscious realization of the truth that we are a part, the most important part, of the stupendous whole created by God, and that we are working in cooperation with Him, we will come into possession of a power and dignity which will make our lives sublime. The greatest minds of all ages have drawn their strength from the invisible source, from their vital connection with the power which creates and works through every one of us. They have also believed in the great mission of the race, believed in a divine plan running through the universe which works for righteousness and shapes the destiny of the race. This faith in the Godward movement of the great human current has characterized even those who did not openly profess any religious faith. Their belief in the divinity of humanity has been a strong factor in their character and the root source of their power. This same faith, this unquestioned confidence in the divine cosmic intelligence, has given more comfort, has brought more peace of mind and happiness to vast multitudes of human beings than any other thing. Indeed, it is the only thing that can bring us true peace, enduring happiness. There is something beside brain force needed to make a man a real constructive power in the world, and that is his divine connection, his being in the current which runs Godward. Without this essential, notwithstanding all that the mind and the body can do for us, we feel a void in our being, a great lack, a longing, a yearning for something, we know not what. Without this, even though we have the most complete physical and mental equipment, we are like a new electric car, ready for service, thoroughly equipped in every detail, except the trolley pole, which makes the connection with the electric current. Completion, satisfaction, divine energy can only come from attuning ourselves to something beyond the physical and the mental plane. We must put up our trolley pole and tap the infinite source of power, or else we are, so far as true progress is concerned, in the position of the car that is not connected with the motor force that alone gives it power to move forward. We must tap the divine current running Godward through contemplation, through prayer, through noble deeds, unselfish service, honest endeavor to live up to our best. We cannot make connection with the divine power through any selfish cause, any greedy deed. It is a strange thing that human beings will take the chances of cutting themselves off from this mighty current which runs truthward, justiceward, and Godward, and try to make a substitute of their own puny strength. Yet every time we consciously do wrong, every time we depart from the truth, every time we commit a dishonest, unworthy act, do a mean, contemptible thing, we separate ourselves from this current and lessen the omnipotent grip upon us. We break our connection and become prey to all sorts of fears and doubts. Someone has truly said that, when a man has committed an evil act, he has attached himself to sorrow. Because of the unity of all life, he has established relationship between himself and the whole human current of vicious influences. He has made connection with all the forces of the universe that conspire to drag him down, to draw him still further away from the Creator and Inspirer of all good. The converse is equally true. Let a man do a good deed, commit himself to a noble work, and all the creative, uplifting forces will rush to his aid. He will be reinforced by the added power of all others working in the same spirit, on the same plane. All good things vibrate in unison. They belong to the same family. So all bad things vibrate in unison and belong to one family. Attract one of them and you attract all the others because they are on the same plane. A discouraged, despondent mood, for example, makes connection with the whole discouraged and despondent family, the whole failure army. And when we make this connection, our entire being is adjusted to the gloomy, discouraged vibration. If we harbor the poverty thought, the fear of coming to want, we unite ourselves with all the poverty vibrations in the universe, and whatever has an affinity with poverty rushes towards us through the current we have established. On the self-same principle, let one think cheerful, optimistic thoughts. Let him make connections with the current of opulence, of the generous, overflowing abundant supply of the Creator, and he allies himself with all the helpful, productive, creative forces in existence. At one time it was thought that we could get no knowledge or impressions excepting through the five senses, but we know now that there are many other avenues by which we communicate with one another. There is a mental, a spiritual communication which is more intimate, more real than any we can make by physical contact or expression. We can sit beside those who are in sympathy with us for hours without touching them, without a word being spoken, without a look, and yet enjoy the sweetest and most delightful converse. We are conscious that our minds are intercommunicating in a deeper, more subtle, satisfying manner than is possible by means of physical contact or through the senses. In fact, there are many occasions in life so sacred that we feel mere words would profane, distress, disturb, rather than help or comfort. We are aware that they are too coarse to convey the finest sentiments, that they are too bungling, too awkward to carry the expressions of sympathy, of love back and forth from soul to soul that are in tune with each other. The message of love teaches that the love of life is a single heart beating through God and you and me. One life runs through all creation's veins. The mind sees beauties which the physical eye never beholds. The mental ear hears harmonies, melodies which the auditory nerve is too gross to perceive. The soul, through its closer union with God, receives perceptions which even the mind cannot comprehend. By means of this divine connection through the great within of ourselves, we can accumulate power that will revolutionize our lives. Right here in our own being we can loose streams of energy infinitely more potent than any physical power. We know that the great cosmic ether everywhere about us is filled with divine vibrations, charged with spiritual force and omniscient intelligence, which are always awaiting to flood our minds when we make the right connections and are ready to receive them. This cosmic ether or universal substance is the source of all supply, as well as that of that divine power, which most people shut out of their lives because they do not know how to unite themselves with it. They resolutely shut their minds to the divine inflow by refusing to believe in anything that is not demonstrable through the senses. Most of us are very skeptical of the reality of the unseen. We are doubting Thomases, who can be convinced only by the material, by that which we can see or feel. If children could only be trained in a different atmosphere, if they could be made at the start to reach out mentally into the unseen realities and utilize them for their own purposes, just as we mold and fashion material things, there would be comparatively few failures in life. It was intended that man should live in perpetual contact with the power that created him, that would keep him in tune with all that is healthful and good and pure and true. But unfortunately, we are constantly losing our connection and thus making ourselves impotent, weak, when we could be potent, strong, creative. To live in wireless communication with the divine current that runs through all creation is to be in touch with divinity indeed, is to be divinely successful. No power outside of ourselves can cut us off from communication with this current. Even the worst criminals, those who have been cut off from human society, may still be one with their source if they choose. The Creator has not cut them off, has not discarded them. They have broken the connection themselves. The Creator would not blast with a thunderbolt, would not crush with His wrath the most profane wretch that ever lived, even though He should curse him for creating him. The great love of the Father would still sustain him, keep him alive, feed him, permit the same beautiful sun to shine upon him as upon the greatest saint. All the blessings of nature would still be there for his enjoyment, would be given as freely to him as to the most devoted worshiper. If we could only grasp this superb truth, our oneness with the great creative principle of the universe, it would transform the race. It would banish fear. It would bring peace and harmony into our lives. It would give us a sense of security and satisfaction and happiness such as we never knew before. Until we realize our unity with God and one another, we can never grow to our full stature. We can never utilize the manifold powers at our command. Nor shall we ever reach that glorified manhood which matches the Creator's pattern of the possible man until it is ingrained into every child's nature that he was not only created by his Father-Mother God, but that he is forever after vitally connected with Him, that he is nearer to Him than his own hands and feet, closer than his own heartbeat. This oneness of the child with his Maker is the principle which must ultimately mold the race into perfect beings. End of chapter 16. End of The Victorious Attitude by Orison Swett Marden.